This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup week of July 20th, 2015. There are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if you see something you like in this video, just be sure to check out the description of this video where I will place links to each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here is 30 flat badges, labels, and banners. This is a pack of 30 different badges and ribbons for Adobe Illustrator. They also include a JPEG, but it does have this light gray background on it, so it will be a little bit more of a pain to clip out these different elements if you want to use the JPEG than if they include it with a white background. So if you want to use this to its full extent, I think having Illustrator would be the most efficient way to go about doing this. But there is a nice selection of different badges here, none of which have type, by the way, but you can of course overlay your own custom type across all these different elements if that's something you want to do. But this is a pretty straightforward pack as far as at least what you get. Pretty much what you see right here is what you can expect to get when you get the download. It's very straightforward as far as badges go. There are a ton of different options here to pick from and use, so hopefully you'll find something inside this pack that kind of suits your needs for a different project, or just to have it in your back pocket for something you're working on in the future. It's always nice to have a few extra elements laying around in case you need to get a project done pretty fast, or just want some inspiration for a good starting point. But that's it for this pack. There's 30 different vector badges to go in and use, and if you like what you see right here, just be sure to grab them this week. Next up is Web Wireframes User Flow. This is a pack of wireframes for web design, and it is provided in Adobe Illustrator format, so I have it opened up inside Illustrator here to show it, and there are quite a few different possible layout examples to go in and choose from, so I'm just going to kind of quickly scroll through all the different available options and kind of give you my thoughts on these. So I don't have this particular font loaded, which is actually Helvetica, so I should probably turn that on, but that's why these appear to have a pink background. But once you have Helvetica loaded, that won't be there, and this will work just fine. And you can of course customize this type to say something different if that's what you want to do, so you can go ahead and feel free to customize these as you see fit. But keep in mind too, when you're dealing with something like a wireframe, all these are just basic starting points where you can go in and move these different elements to be kind of how you want them to be. So if you want to move these sections around, change stuff around, that's really the whole purpose of this, so that you can very quickly mock up a website or even an app to give people an idea of what to expect or the direction that you want to head as the app development or website development moves forward. And honestly, using wireframes like this can save you a whole lot of time, especially if you're dealing with a client and you don't want to get too far into a project pursuing the wrong direction, where if you just send them a basic wireframe of the layout, they can either okay it or deny it and kind of give you some feedback of what they want to change before you spend the real time making it live by coding it and making all the visual assets that a website needs to really function. So there is a nice selection of different elements here that can kind of help you convey the idea of things like photos, loading bars, images, different content sections, as well as top bar navigations, and right here's one for a sign up bar. So this is pretty versatile when it comes to all the things that you might want to display to a client. And I'm getting near the bottom here. Here's a little nice slider bar in case you want to do something like that. And right here's a big section for navigation bars that have drop downs, as well as areas to enter a username, email, and password. And here's another variation of a drop down bar right here, as well as notification icons. So this should keep you busy for quite a while. And of course, whoops, you can duplicate these different elements right here if you want to have more sections for people to choose from on the top navigation, so I definitely recommend going in there and doing that as you go ahead and make your own wireframe. But that's pretty much it for this pack, and this is the last section right here with this different option for a search bar. So if you're looking to build a website for your client or even yourself and you just want to have a good way to very quickly demonstrate the general flow of the website and how it's going to behave as it becomes a live website, then this is a great way to go ahead and do that. There's a lot of elements here to give you a pretty good starting point to build from and use. So if you like what you've seen thus far and you might find this helpful in the future, just be sure to grab it this week. Next up is Wild Pitch, which is a font. This font is provided in OpenType font format, and I have it opened up inside Adobe Illustrator here to show it. And all the letters included are caps, but if you type in lowercase, you get the version without any texture, and if you type in uppercase, it comes with a secondary version that is textured just like what you see right here. So I'll just zoom in on the lowercase version really quick so you can get a good idea of how these letters look. They have a pretty interesting style to them. I wouldn't say comic is the right word, but they certainly have a very rounded appearance that kind of brings that word to my mind. But it's an interesting serif font with a Western influence, so I kind of like this font for that reason. And I also like that they did include this secondary version inside the actual font that has these textured versions in case you're looking for a more roughened or weathered version and you want to make that happen very quickly without having to worry about overlaying textures on top of it. So that's kind of a nice bonus. One concern though is that they do include numbers 0 through 9, as well as a very small handful of special characters, but they all do have this weathered texture on them. So if you want to use numbers in combination with letters, for example, that might be a little bit of a pain because you'll have to kind of either fill in the gaps of all these different textured elements or just end up using the textured version. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're thinking about how you can use this and how you can customize this. I'll just highlight this quick though and go to type, and then glyphs near the top here so you can see everything that's included. So it's pretty much what you would expect here, except as far as the punctuation goes, it's very basic: exclamation point, hashtag, question mark, a bracket, and then a dash symbol. So if you need anything beyond that, you'll probably have to custom make them, but you could very easily, for example, turn this little dash symbol into a period if you went and outlined it and then shrunk it a little bit as far as the width goes. So that's one way you can kind of customize this one a little bit further. But I typed up Free Goods Roundup here at the bottom so you can see how this looks typed up into a sentence. The stock kerning is really solid. I think the spacing looks pretty good as well. Overall, typed up into a sentence, all these letters work really nicely together. This looks very solid and complete. So pretty cool font that seems to do a great job as you type out longer sentences. And I really do see this as a headline font, something that'd be really big and bold at the top with a little bit more legible or standardized font below it. So I think this will be a pretty cool font if you're looking for this kind of a vibe. And if you like what you've seen thus far, just be sure to pick it up this week while it's still free. Next up is me, Responsive Personal Portfolio. This is a portfolio theme using a responsive framework called Foundation, and I don't have any direct experience using Foundation, but it seems like it works pretty well, at least with this example. So I'm going to go through this website and show you what to expect as you download it. And it's also worth noting that you will need coding knowledge like basic HTML and CSS if you want to go in here and customize this. So keep that in mind. This doesn't use a CMS like WordPress or Squarespace or something like that. So the more coding knowledge you have, the more useful you'll likely find this to be. And I'll just quickly reload the page right here so you can watch this sidebar. As you load the page, this little sidebar bounces in from the side, so it's kind of a cool little bonus right there as far as the behavior of the site itself. As I scroll over these different portfolio images, you can tell there are transitional effects that end up showing the name of whatever you chose to title your different works. If I click on this walrus, for example, right here, it brings me to a page with these different elements, and if I click on one of these different elements, it'll bring me to a light box right here where you can see them a little bit bigger. I don't know how this scales as you have bigger and bigger images, but you can also tell there is a little caption here section. So if you want to explain a little bit more about the projects that are being shown on this portfolio site, I would certainly recommend going in there and doing that. To close this, you can just hit this X in the upper right. At the bottom right here, there's plenty of room for explaining your work, so definitely go in there and do that, as well as a post date, title, and then a little subheading right here. At the bottom, there are all the basic social sharing options as well. If you click on the Contact Me button right here, it brings you to a contact section with a map at the top, as well as a basic name, email, message form that you can go ahead and have people use to contact you if they need to. So here's the About Me section with the photo up at the top here, and plenty of room to explain who you are and what you do. There's also a My Studio page, which is kind of a cool idea that you can either show off your workspace, perhaps talk about your own personal business and what you specialize in, web design, web development, whatever the case may be. I'm sure you can customize these quite easily. The short codes are just kind of explaining the different options that this particular theme has. So there's two different pages for different short codes, and it does include responsive videos as well, so it's actually pretty cool. Sometimes getting like a YouTube video to be responsive on a website takes a little bit of fiddling around to make it work properly, just because of the way that the YouTube Embed API works. So it's cool that they included that. And right here at the bottom, there's a My Work section, which will just bring you to each of these individual different sections in case you didn't want to navigate through this front page right here. But that's it for this theme. I think it's a pretty solid theme that does a very good job of focusing on the work. And as you populate this with more and more work as well, I think it'll just keep being more and more visually interesting for anyone that happens to stop by and take a look. So if you're on the hunt for a portfolio theme and you don't want to use something like WordPress and you want to have the control to really code it yourself and customize it to be exactly what you want, then this is a pretty solid start right here. So if you think you'll end up using this, just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. Next up is Vector Ink Brushstroke Set. This pack includes 12 of these watercolor textures in both EPS as well as JPEG format, but the JPEG actually has this background right here included as well, so it is a flat image, so you'll get a whole lot more use out of these if you open them up inside Adobe Illustrator or a similar vector program that can take in the EPS format. So the entire pack includes 13 total, 12 plus 1 bonus, so I opened up 5 here to show just so you can get a good idea of what to expect in this pack. So this is the first one, and I'll just zoom in a little bit closer on this so you can get a good idea of how this texture looks up close. You can tell it has a whole lot going on in terms of color variation and texture variation, so that kind of sets these apart a little bit in comparison to some of the other watercolor vector textures that there are. This one just feels a whole lot more rough, almost like it was taken off of a canvas or something like that that had a whole lot of relief going on to give this kind of an interesting look. So here's the second one that I'm going to show. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer here. You can tell there's some kind of thick ink spots, so I don't even know if watercolor is the right word to use here. This might be like an acrylic paint or something like that too, just because it seems like this is a pretty thick sort of paint in combination to a watercolor or something like that. So here's the next one that's a little bit different shape. And it is important too when you're thinking about these, think about these as a texture or perhaps a background element and not as a brush. Even though the word brush is in the title, these really aren't Illustrator brushes that you can use and just draw with, but you can just kind of stamp these on. So maybe stamp is actually the best word you can kind of use when you're thinking about how to use these on your work and how to apply them. Of course, you could overlay them over existing work or use a mask and kind of knock out your object from this image right here if you want to work that way. So it should be pretty versatile depending on how you want to go ahead and use these. So here's the next one. This one has a whole lot of color variation going on, as you can see, and that's kind of a defining characteristic of a lot of these different stamps or textures, however you want to look at it, is that they have a really nice and varied amount of depth and color from the very darks to the very lights. Something that you also don't tend to see a whole lot of in vector textures, but this one certainly has a whole lot of that going on. So here's the last one that I'm going to show, and this is actually a very cool shape. And once again, it has a very nice amount of detail between the darks and then the lights of colors chosen right here. So it gives this a lot of depth and a lot of character, which I think if you're looking for something very impactful to add to your work, then these different brushes or stamps, however you want to call them, will tend to work out really well. But that's it for this pack. Remember, this is just 5 of the total 13 that are included in this pack. So if you want to see everything that's included in this pack, just be sure to download it this week while it's still free. And last up here is Nature Photoshop Actions. This is a set of 10 different actions for Adobe Photoshop, particularly for photography. So I have an example opened up right here that I'll apply all these effects to so you can get a good idea of what to expect. And there are 10 in total. And to quickly install this, you can typically just double click on the actual action, which will open up Photoshop, and then just make sure Window and then Actions near the top here is selected, and then open up the Natural Action Package folder right here on my screen. And once you have your photo open, just click one of these different available options and then hit the play button, and it should apply it to your image. But one thing to note here, it does apply it directly to your image and not to like a folder above your image. So just kind of keep that in mind, that it will overwrite whatever image you have saved. So always have a backup ready to go just in case you accidentally save over it, which would not be a fun thing to do. So this is the standard photo that I'm going to start with that I picked up off Unsplash. So I'm just going to go through the 10 different options very quickly right here so you can kind of see what to expect. So the first one right here is called Mackenzie. Has a nice vintage vibe that really pumps up some of the colors here. The next one is called Gunnison, which is a little bit more of a laid back vintage look, something a little bit more sun faded in my opinion. This one's called Delaware, which has a very strong color overwash, as you can see right here. This one right here is called Cannabazoo. I might have said that wrong, but it has a very blue-green tint to it, so it's a pretty interesting effect on this particular photo. This one's called Mohawk, another very vintage one, but a little bit more subdued than the Mackenzie example right here for reference. So it just doesn't quite darken up stuff quite as much, which if you're looking for something a little bit more subtle, this might come in pretty handy. This one right here is called Hudson, a very nice kind of desaturation going on that just brings down the colors of the photo a little bit. I actually quite like this particular one. This one's called Balsas, which has a green tint effect to it. The next one's called Armagosa, I might be saying that wrong, but a very powerful blue overwash effect on this particular action. This one's called Albion, which pumps up the whites a little bit, but still has that blue tint going on, but certainly nowhere as strong as the previous example was. And the last one up here is called Alamo, so it's actually very similar to the one called Albion, but it fades things out and kind of desaturates things just a little bit more, but it maintains that kind of a blue tint throughout the entire photo. So a nice pack of 10 different actions for Photoshop, and of course, these will look different depending on what kind of different photos you apply them to, and you could also try applying them to designs or illustrations. You might get some interesting effects by doing that. So if you like what you've seen thus far, just be sure to grab them this week while they're still free. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something you liked, just be sure to check out the description of this video where you'll find a link to get it. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite, and if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday, so you know it's free this week on Creative Market. Thank you for watching.